Hi, my name's Lee Topham. This is my 1966 Dodge Coronet. It's a 383 engine, automatic gearbox. Just over 40 years, the better side of 40 years old, and I've had the car since 2017. I've always been around cars and motorbikes since I was a child, especially racing cars. My father was into racing all sorts of hill climb cars and sprint cars and auto testing, rallying, special stage rallying. So it was something, I guess it was in my DNA. It's always been in my dad's life, and I just picked it up from there, passing spanners as a young child. And then the affection for the sort of big American cars and V8s that came about when I was in my teen years. And I worked, my best friend's dad owned a garage. I worked for him on weekends, part-time, and he used to build engines for Brisker Formula One stock cars. And they were predominantly big block engines, Chevys, predominantly Chevys. A lot of them were 8-9 litre, best part 700 or 800 brake horsepower. We built those engines and we'd run them in on a weekend to do the initial fire up. They were unsilenced, they were nasty, gnarly engines. And as a child, you couldn't help but just be impressed by the sound. You know, you stand there with a hose pipe just cooling the radiator off. If that's the only job I had, I was just in awe of these things. And that was me, I was hooked. So from that moment on, I guess the four cylinders, as I've got older, I've realised I just don't like four-cylinder inline four engines. Okay, in an everyday car to get me to and from work when I'm not really interested in what I'm driving, but when it comes to fun, a V-twin, because I like motorbikes as well, but twins, V-twin, singles, V8's top of the shop. It just makes the right noises. It just sounds just how I think a car should sound. So the experience really, that's where it all started. And then all through life, I'm an engineer. I work in engineering by trade, worked with aircraft, worked with cars, worked with bikes, and it's always been a hobby. I don't think there's ever been a day in my life where I've not had something that's a little bit different to an everyday car. And it's, yeah, the tinkering, the ownership, the whole thing is something that I enjoy. And now I got this car, really it's a bit of a strange one because I wasn't looking for a Dodge Coronet when I bought this car. I spent 2 years looking for a car in America. I had somebody looking for a particular car. It was actually a Ford Galaxy, 1963.5 Ford Galaxy. I'm very particular by nature. I know exactly what I want and I like to go for it. So I held out for 2 years. For me, that's a long time. The car that I wanted just didn't come up. We saw cars, they were either the wrong condition, the wrong specification, wrong colour, never quite got the right car. And in that time, I was getting itchy fingers because I had this big gap in my life. 2 years without something like the car that I've got now, a big project or just a big object. It just didn't sit right. So I started looking in the UK. And I'd seen this car before. I saw it on a website, somewhere like that, 6 months before. And then it popped up again, and the photo was slightly different. I noticed the wheels had changed, and the wheels just made a massive difference. The original photo, it had some chrome wheels. I just didn't like it. I liked the shape of the car, and I just thought, I know changing the wheels is nothing, but suddenly it had these steel wheels on, and it just looked right. It wasn't too much of a car, it wasn't too little of a car. It just seemed to look right. So I changed from a 63.5 Galaxy to looking at something closer to home. It was the first car I looked at home, and that was it really. I saw the car, I knew people who knew of the car, and they all spoke well of it. It had a good history in the UK, and that was me really. Like I say, I wasn't out to get a Mopar, which is what they're more commonly known as, but it just fit the bill. It was a medium to full-size car. Officially, it's classed as an intermediate in the States, as much as it's big on the UK roads, but it was a big block engine. That's what I wanted. It had a bench seat in it. That's what I wanted, because I wanted something more family orientated from having two-seater sports cars in the past. Made the right noises, which is really important. And yeah, it just had that road presence, the sheer size along with the sound. It has a presence that, call it character. And a lot of cars don't have that, and it had it, so I was sold, and that was it really. So as I was saying earlier, the speedometer and all the gauge clusters, everything's, I got it working. The speedo was stuck at just shy of 140 miles an hour, so that needed looking at. Now, the speedo parts are really rare, really hard to get hold of. A lot of them just broke, they're just worn out. I was lucky to speak to a chap in the States. He had one, we arranged a price, and we did the deal. The part came over. It worked. I tested it with my cordless drill, yeah, everything's good. However, me being me, I still wanted to take it apart and clean everything up. So I took it was like a watchmaker's job. You're talking about a pin that drives it that's 0.7 millimeter in diameter. Took everything apart, stripped it, cleaned it, put it all back together. I was testing it with the cordless drill, put it all back together. All worked absolutely fine. I thought, I'll put this somewhere safe because the cats go in the garage at home and wander over the worktops. So I've got a double fridge freezer in the garage, and I put it on top of the fridge freezer. I stood back, I looked at it, took a photo. Absolutely brilliant, really chuffed with myself. And I thought, I'll reward myself by pouring a nice gin and tonic. So I opened the fridge door to get my gin and tonic out, and I'd not put the cluster on far enough. It pulled the whole thing off the top, and it landed face down on the floor, and it smashed the whole thing to smithereens. So it was actually in a worse condition than when I started. And it takes some enthusiasm to go again, because you know these are parts that have come from America. Years ago, I'd have been mad as a wasp, pacing up and down. But I've just learned these things happen. I didn't laugh immediately, don't get me wrong, and I probably had more than one gin and tonic, but these things happen. And so that led to then, I had this 0.7 millimeter pin that I talked about. It actually drives, it's on a magnetic coupling, so it's not even a direct drive. I ended up having to then, I got the help of somebody at work in an R&D department, so we work with, it's quite intricate engineering. He managed to turn us up a 0.7 millimeter needle, and then we had to recalibrate the magnets to make sure everything worked, so it led to a massive job. But I could have just put it back with it stuck. But I was there, we're going to do it right. So again, it was another 2 or 3 weeks worth of work, and that was 2 or 3 weeks worth of nights, not just one night, just on this one item. But yeah, these things happen, and I'm sure people who have built cars have all experienced something similar in the time.